In a hospital's neonatal ward among the many newborn babies, one stands out for her striking beauty. Years later, at an amusement park, we see that the baby has grown up. All of her friends are enchanted by how cute and charming Mona is. At school, while playing hide and seek, all the boys eagerly wait for her to finish counting, hoping to be the first one she catches. Everyone is busy taking care of Mona by making everything easy for her to handle, protect her at any cost. Years pass and Mona grows up. One day, we see her waking up in her bedroom, and Mona has now transformed into a young woman. She rushes to high school, and everyone on the street stops to admire the beautiful girl. At school, everyone greets her warmly, thrilled to talk to her. Everyone except Medaka, who simply responds with a polite greeting. Mona wonders why he's the only one who greets her so coldly. Every day, she tries to start a conversation, asking how he's adjusting to his new school since he transferred 2 weeks ago. Medaka immediately grows annoyed with her chatter as she offers to show him around the school again. All the boys watch enviously as Mona invites him to spend time with her once more. Medaka asks Mona to stop getting so close to him, feeling the envious looks around him. Mona sits at the desk next to him, wondering how it's possible that there's a boy who doesn't care about her. Her ego feels bruised. She notices Medaka looking at his phone and catches a glimpse of pictures of the kitten. Mona thinks she's finally found a way to change how he sees her. She asks if he likes cats while cutely mimicking a kitten by grooming her arms and hands. Everyone in the classroom gushes over how adorable Mona is, but the only reaction that matters to her is Medaka's. He looks at her annoyed as heck and asks her not to bother him. Everyone in the classroom stares at him in disbelief, angry at how he treated the charming girl. Mona can't believe she hasn't been able to elicit the slightest reaction from him even after doing this much. Until Medaka seems like he wants to ask her something, Mona gets excited and eagerly asks what he needs. Medaka then asks her not to talk to him unless it's absolutely necessary. Mona is stunned by what she hears, recalling how everyone has adored her since childhood. Panicking, Mona runs off, wondering how Medaka hasn't fallen for her yet. She comes up with a new plan, climbing a ladder to hang a poster while he walks by, knowing no man could resist looking at her long, beautiful legs. Medaka passes by, notices her intentions, and when he realizes he cannot help but feel annoyed by her antics. Realizing plan F failed, she moves on to plan B, falling from the ladder in a way that innocently and cutely reveals her underwear. Several boys rush to help her, but Medaka simply looks at her with exasperation and cringe. Mona can't believe that it didn't work either, leaving her with no choice but to use her ultimate move. During class, Mona raises her hand and tells the teacher she isn't feeling well and wants to go to the infirmary. The teacher agrees and looks for someone to accompany her. A girl volunteers, but Mona pretends to take a trip and leans on Medaka, telling the teacher he can take her. The teacher asks Medaka if he can handle it, and Medaka has no choice but to agree. In the infirmary, Mona corners him against the wall. He asks if she's really feeling unwell. Mona replies that the infirmary is usually empty at this time, and since he's the first boy to push her to such extremes, asks if he feels anything for her. She worries that his distant attitude might mean she's done something to upset him. Medaka says that's not the case. Seeing his first hint of empathy, Mona thinks she's finally got him, but Medaka's expression quickly shifts back to the familiar look of annoyance she knows too well. Realizing she has to act quickly, she grabs his arm and leads him to sit down, but they trip on the curtain and fall onto the bed. Mona thinks things have gone too far and apologizes, then notices that even while she's on top of him, he still looks irritated. Mona refuses to believe her charms aren't working, so she unbuttons her blouse, exclaiming that it was an accident. Knowing she's gone too far, she hopes this will finally win him over. Medaka frowns at her and resists giving in. When even that fails, Mona throws a tantrum, causing the mattress to fall to the floor with both of them. Medaka asks if she's hurt. Finally, a small moment of closeness. Mona feels the moment, but then she remembers her blouse is still open. Embarrassed, she replies that she's fine and asks him to let her go. Flustered, Medaka stands up and assures her he didn't mean for that to happen. He tells her they should return to class and before leaving, suggests she save moments like that for a boy she genuinely cares about as he thinks he might not be the one. Hearing this, Mona can't help but blush. She grows annoyed with herself for allowing this boy to make her feel something when it should be the other way around. Shortly after, Mona returns to the classroom. The other boys ask if she's feeling better, and she replies that she is, thanking Medaka for helping her earlier. Something feels different, and Mona realizes that for the first time, the boy is looking directly at her. She, however, doesn't dare meet his gaze and wonders why she feels embarrassed and nervous, almost as if she's falling for him. Mona collapses on her desk, looks at Medaka, and swears on her life that she will make him fall in love with her no matter what it takes to do so. The next day, Mona arrives at school, greeted warmly by everyone. She meets Medaka in the hallway, and once again, he gives her a polite and cold greeting. She notices that he's finally wearing the school uniform. Medaka responds with a simple yes and continues walking. As he passes by a pair of girls in the hallway, one of them, Asahi, blushes at the sight of him but pretends nothing happened. During gym class, Mona stretches, catching the attention of all the boys who are mesmerized. However, she's only concerned with whether Medaka notices how well-toned her body is. She doesn't think much of the others busy staring at her because she's on a mission, and that is only Medaka. She tries to get his attention by shouting for him to stretch with her, but he ignores her while looking rather irritated, which annoys the rest of her classmates. The coach instructs the girls to get ready for their game. Mona wonders what else she can use to try to catch Medaka's attention since her legs and chest haven't worked so far. She then thinks about another option but recalls Medaka's words from the day before. You should say things like that for a boy who truly cares about you. The coach starts announcing the teams while Mona convinces herself that it doesn't matter. She'll do whatever it takes to make him fall for her. After class, Mona is exhausted, her body covered in a light sheen of sweat. She dries herself in a way that reveals her abdomen. The boys go wild at the sight of this part of Mona, as they've never seen this side of her before. Mona is confident that her abs and her belly button will be spicy enough to make Medaka fall for her, but the boy simply turns around and walks away, muttering, "Clear mind, pure spirit." Once again, Mona has been defeated. Medaka goes to the water fountains to refresh himself, and Mona follows as if in a trance. He avoids looking at her directly, which Mona takes as a good sign. Yet something feels off, so she decides to abandon her mission and walk away. She turns on the faucet for a drink, and just as she takes a sip, Medaka looks at her, slightly blushing. He quickly averts his gaze when she notices. Mona realizes she finally has his attention. Then, by accident, she closes her hand over the faucet, causing water to splash all over her, soaking her shirt completely. Medaka begins to shout in embarrassment at the sight, and Mona starts to scream as she realizes what's happened. She crouches down and covers herself, trying to avoid making an even bigger fool of herself in front of Medaka. But it is all a desperate act to hide her wet body from the sight of Medaka, so she doesn't have to get embarrassed by him staring at her. In a rare act of kindness, Medaka takes off his shirt and wraps it over her to hide her revealing body. Mona can't help but notice his physique and blushes. Medaka decides to head back to the gym, and Mona thanks him for his gesture. As Medaka walks away, Mona thinks to herself, now that's what showing a perfect belly peak looks like. Meanwhile, the girl hidden behind the door watches the entire scene unfold. Leaving the school, Medaka suddenly realized the shirt that he left with Mona must smell of sweat. Two boys greet him and ask if he's being too hard on Mona, pointing out that she's putting in a lot of effort to win him over and suggesting that he should be more considerate about it. Medaka decides to ignore their chatter and keeps walking, but they insist on having a civil conversation. He takes them to a park and explains that he's the heir to a feline temple and is forbidden from getting too close to girls because of his duties. He's never had a girlfriend because his village only had elderly people and goats. Also, he doesn't really understand anything about girls as he's never had the opportunity to interact with them. The boys start to understand why Medaka acts the way he does with Mona even when she tries her best to hang on to him. It's not that he's ignoring Mona intentionally. He simply doesn't know how to deal with her at all. Not just her, but all girls in general. Medaka admits that he's only ever seen girls as pretty as Mona on TV shows. Remembering all the spectacles and displays Mona has made over the past few days, he feels like he's been thrown straight into the big leagues all too easily. Unlike his village, the city is full of temptations, making it very difficult for him to stay focused on his path. The boys understand but argue it wouldn't hurt to try being a little nicer to her, no matter what happens. Medaka agrees with them but knows that if he gives in even slightly, he'll end up falling for her. He refuses to betray his faith in a girl as he has never hoped it to happen even in his wildest dreams. But then, for a moment, he imagines dating her, but he shouts to banish the impure thought and begins murmuring once again. Clear mind, pure spirit. The boys realize that this mantra helps him keep his thoughts in check. Medaka reminds himself that he transferred schools to strengthen his mind and live a life free from worldly desires. The next day, Mona gives him back his shirt, freshly washed. Medaka tells her it wasn't necessary, but Mona teasingly asks if he wants it to keep her scent. Once more, Medaka struggles to maintain his composure while facing the direct antagonist on the path to keep his faith. As soon as she arrives at school in the art room, the boys eagerly watch as Mona poses for Medaka to draw her. They continue to be enchanted by Mona, saying that she remains as charming as ever. However, Mona doesn't give a damn about them. But Medaka avoids looking at her and concentrates on his drawing board to keep impure thoughts at bay. Frustrated by his lack of attention, Mona suggests that he take advantage of her rare modeling offer and make her pose however he wants, even joking about posing without clothes. Upon hearing this, the boy next to her almost pulls out his own hair, envious of the gift Medaka is receiving. Medaka's lack of reaction annoys her, as it was just a playful joke. But Medaka continues to look at her with a certain repulsion, not giving a damn about her good mood. On the other hand, the boys from before standing next to her praise her by saying that she is indeed very funny. Confident, Mona plans to end her and Medaka's indifference to her art project, drawing each other. She devises a shameless strategy to win him over. Mona looks for seductive poses to make Medaka's heart race. She remembers when he could not look away after she got wet and came up with the perfect pose. Medaka fights off impure thoughts by concentrating on his creed, but when Mona changes her pose, the blood rushes to his head. He enters a state of extreme meditation to block out inappropriate thoughts. They begin to work and Medaka only focuses on making a good drawing. Mona doesn't understand how he can do it so calmly with her as a model. Meanwhile, a girl in class can't stop staring at Mona, leading her model to scold her for not paying attention. Mona continues posing provocatively and notices her classmates watching more intently than Medaka. She asks him what part he is drawing now. Medaka replies that he is working on her neck, making Mona feel like he is devouring her with his eyes. When she discovers that the boy is looking at that exact area, Mona starts to blush because the simple fact that he is looking at her neck already makes her start thinking about many wrong things, and as soon as that warm feeling takes over her body, Mona ends up not being able to resist. Overwhelmed, she runs to the girls' bathroom, wishing that Medaka would always look at her that way. Back in the classroom, the boys admire Medaka's detailed work and ask him what he plans to do with it. Medaka imagines various scenarios for his drawing in his head and begins to pray. Later, at the library, Medaka looks for a book for his homework, only to find Mona reaching for it. Mona jokingly comments that it must be fate and suggests they read it together. Medaka declines, hands her the book, and leaves, muttering a prayer. After all, the simple fact of touching her hand by accident leaves his mind more agitated than an earthquake. As for Mona, she stays behind him as she is trying her best to understand him. Disappointed, Mona notices that the girl from art class is still staring at her, and when she stares back at the girl, she manages to leave the library scared. Undeterred by the rejection, Mona decides to invade Medaka's personal space. While the two read the book, the boys next to them watched from afar, cursing Maka as they wished they were in his place, able to enjoy Mona's company to the fullest. As for Haruno, she continues to be obsessed with Mona and stares at her from afar again. When she sees that the girl apparently wants to tell her something, Mona doesn't understand why Haruno stays away instead of approaching her. Thinking back, she remembers that Haruno was looking at her in art class, and coincidentally, on that occasion, she was accompanied by Medaka. With this in mind, Mona deduces that Haruno is actually looking at Medaka because she has a crush on him. Feeling like she is now competing with Haruno, Mona realizes that despite spending all her time with Medaka, he doesn't even look back at her. Determined to change her strategy, she begins analyzing Haruno's behavior, convinced that Mika must like people with her profile, quiet, bookish girls. She worries if Medaka prefers girls like Haruno. After all the effort she's invested, Mona won't let anyone else take him away. Furthermore, Medaka continues to show no interest in her, so she can't waste any more time and needs to act. She is determined to show her full potential to win Medaka over. After completing her analysis, Mona starts to behave just like Haruno, even putting on glasses to fully get into character. She sits in front of him with a cup of tea and glasses, possibly over the counter, trying to project a different side of herself to see if it will make him fall for her. As soon as they see her with glasses, the cattle in the library start to venerate her again. Her followers, usually eager to praise her every move, are shocked by her bold behavior in the library and overlook the rule-breaking tea. Mona believes her intellectual Mona act fits perfectly with the library atmosphere and is confident that she will win Medaka's heart. Medaka notices her glasses and thinks she looks cute, but quickly looks down to avoid further thoughts. Mona notices this and taps his leg with her foot, sending shivers down his spine. Knowing that she is close to winning him over, Mona tenderly asks him what he thinks of her. Summoning divine strength, Medaka stands up and firmly asks her to stop kicking him. Once again, Mona's efforts fail and Haruno watches the scene in fascination. Mona realizes that Haruno is hopelessly in love with Medaka, making her a new rival. After that, Mona starts stalking Haruno wherever she goes, intending to better understand the girl's behavior. She quickly realizes that Haruno is very helpful, watering the school's plants and cleaning the blackboard without anyone even asking. Seeing that Haruno is genuinely a good girl, Mona decides to continue stalking her for a while longer, hoping to discover some flaws. Only then will she be sure that Haruno has no chance of winning Medaka's heart. In the locker room, Mona dismisses Haruno's virtues and focuses on her flaws to prove that she can't win over Medaka. However, when Mona sees Haruno changing and notices her well-lined figure, she realizes she is dealing with a strong competitor. Meanwhile, the other girls begin complimenting Haruno's body, expressing their jealousy. Haruno, in turn, becomes embarrassed, displaying an unusual level of modesty. Yet another quality Mona realizes she lacks. At another point, Mona vents to herself, admitting that Haruno is a much nicer and sweeter girl than she is. Since Maka is also reserved, she worries that Haruno might have an advantage over her. After all, the two seem much more compatible. Frustrated, Mona jogs on the track to let off steam, upset that Haruno has qualities she lacks. A boy approaches her to give her a book she asked for. Mona thanks him and shows some feminine affection, brightening the boy's day. She realizes that she has never spoken to Medaka like this, flattering him and expressing affection. She hatches a new plan. Medaka is resting on the school roof feeling the breeze when a handkerchief floats towards him. He catches it, and Mona appears to thank him for retrieving her handkerchief. She plans to charm him so deeply that he won't realize he's fallen head over heels for her. Mona claims that she goes there to relax as well and thanks him again for catching her favorite handkerchief, mentioning how helpful he always is. She tries to tell them that she likes him, but the words don't come out. Despite having said it effortlessly just moments ago, she struggles to get the words out. The wind lifts her skirt, forcing her to hold it as she continues to try to confess her feelings. When she can't manage it, she blurts out that he disgusts her. Medaka assures her that he didn't look under her skirt, but Mona decides to postpone the conversation. The pressure mounts as she feels time running out, determined not to let Haruno win him over. A month passed, and Mona hadn't progressed much in winning over Medaka at all, which frustrated her more than before. In class, elections for the festival committee are held. Students draw ballots to see who will be part of it. Medaka's ballot shows that he will not be participating, while Haruno is the first girl selected. Mona becomes the second girl selected. Haruno expresses excitement about working with Mona, who politely returns this sentiment but mentally lists all the insults she knows. After class, they meet to decide on the festival activity, considering options such as a cafe, a play, or a haunted house. Haruno asks what Mona's group did in high school. Mona replies that they had a costume cafe, which Haruno likes, imagining Mona in a cute, oversized costume. Mona immediately rejects the idea, imagining herself in a giant costume that hides her figure. As they continue to work, Mona tries to understand Haruno, realizing that they are now part of a twisted love triangle where only she is interested in making Medaka fall in love with her. However, Haruno seems absurdly happy to collaborate with her love rival, causing Mona to wonder if Haruno doesn't even see her as a worthy competitor. When Mona's pen runs out of ink, Haruno cheerfully offers her a spare one, and Haruno's phone rings. She quickly grabs it, holding it out of Mona's sight almost instantly. It is as if Haruno is intentionally trying to hide something from the eyes of Mona for some reason. Curious, Mona asks what's going on, but Haruno insists that she's the only one who can't see it. Mona, now determined to uncover the secret since she was not expecting Haruno, will reject the idea, politely requests to see it, but Haruno refuses and runs off. Mona chases after her, demanding to know why she can't see the phone. Haruno yells that Mona will hate her if she does. Mona promises she won't as long as she stays away from Medaka. Tackling Haruno, the phone falls to the ground. Then Mona picks it up and sees herself as Haruno's wallpaper, which is rather surprising, but at least it was nothing related to Medaka. Embarrassed, Haruno starts crying and begs Mona not to hate her. She explains that she has been Mona's #1 fan since the entrance ceremony. Mona looked beautiful and made everyone smile, so Haruno secretly started taking pictures. Nothing creepy, just around 300 photos. Mona realizes that Haruno isn't following Medaka but her. Haruno admits she wanted to change the wallpaper before Mona saw it to avoid seeming weird, but now it's too late. But Mona is relieved rather than being disturbed by it or something like that, since at least she is not competing with her to chase Medaka. Mona hugs her, assuring her it's okay and that she doesn't think she's strange. During the hug, Mona recalls that she confessed her feelings for Medaka during the chase. She tries to cover it up by saying she was talking about a fish named Medaka, but Haruno doesn't seem to buy it, having observed Mona closely enough to notice her changes since meeting Medaka. She offers to support Mona in winning his heart. Ironically, Mona finds it annoying when someone doesn't listen to her requests. The next day at school, the students prepare for the school's cultural festival they have been planning for a while now. While doing the work, Mona is approached by Haruno, but when she sees the girl constantly going to talk to her, Mona starts to become less helpful, answering only the basics. However, when she looks at Medaka and sees him focused only on schoolwork. Even so, Mona is unable to look away from him no matter what. Realizing this, Mona is quite invested in Medaka. Haruno says she is rooting for Mona and believes that the cultural festival will be a good opportunity for her to show off to him. But upon hearing this, Mona tries to change the subject, saying once again that she doesn't like Medaka as Haruno is imagining. In this, she remembers again the moment when she asked Haruno to take her hands off Medaka and notices that this made the girl have a totally wrong idea about her. After all, Mona's only goal is just to make him fall in love with her, but she doesn't seem to know about anything that's about to happen after that. After class, Mona goes with Haruno to check out some clothes. While they choose the clothes they will wear, Haruno comments on a legend that revolves around their school's cultural festival. It is about the passage message of fate, also known as the Bridge of Love. Upon hearing this, Mona is left confused, and then Haruno calls her to the window and shows her a specific bridge. She then says that if a couple holds hands on that bridge during the school festival, it will both be in love with each other forever. That said, Haruno hopes that Mona will be able to hold Medaka's hand on that bridge so they can strengthen their relationship. Upon hearing this, Mona once again tries to convince her that they have nothing. But in the middle of the conversation, the teacher pulls Haruno to another place. As for Mona, she realizes that she will not be able to convince Haruno that she doesn't like him unless she can make the boy fall in love with her as soon as possible. She then begins to try on several outfits, hoping to find a look that will make her irresistible. Only then will she be able to make Medaka fall in love with her right away. But after trying on a few outfits, she discards them all and says she needs to find the perfect set of clothes that will make Medaka's heart race. After trying a little more, she manages to find the perfect look. In this case, she will go to the festival dressed as a Playboy bunny. But as soon as she looks in the mirror, she notices that this outfit shows a lot of skin, something that makes her somewhat uncomfortable. She then begins to consider the possibility of changing her look. But as soon as she says this, Medaka himself enters the room and sees her in that appealing outfit. At that, Mona begins to turn redder than a pepper and turns her back on him. As for Medaka, he begins to blush too, and asks why she is wearing those clothes. She then makes an excuse, saying that she is just testing out some clothes as part of her duties on the festival committee. As for Medaka, he drops the papers he was bringing and says that his only function there is just to leave the papers in the room, but he's barely functioning after seeing Mona in this look. He makes it clear that he will leave in a second. But as he collects the papers, Mona hears Haruno's distant voice approaching and realizes that things will get even stranger if she finds her dressed as a bunny next to Medaka, and no explanation will be suitable on this occasion. So before Haruno is about to enter the room, Mona pulls Medaka and hides with him inside the wardrobe among the clothes. But as they get too close, her so-called melons begin to touch him, leaving him without reaction. In the meantime, Haruno collects the papers from the floor, wondering where they came from. Mona, in turn, gets all tense. As she is very close to Medaka, she hopes that he is not able to feel her accelerated heartbeat. After all, she is already favoring him too much by sticking to him. Meanwhile, Medaka continues to cross himself, and in the end, he manages to clear any and all inappropriate thoughts from his mind so as not to break down. However, when she sees him breathing heavily in her air, Mona begins to feel ticklish, which makes her almost laugh out loud. But she manages to control herself. Returning to Haruno, that same teacher from before appears there, asking Haruno to accompany her again. After the two leave, Medaka and Mona finally manage to get out of the cramped hiding place they were in, at which point Mona sighs in relief and then notices that she has just given something very precious to the boy. She looks at him to see if that was enough to make him fall in love with her, and she is hoping all the way about it. But in the end, she is as disappointed as always because her lover boy continues to keep his soul clean of worldly thoughts like passion. When she sees his reaction, she realizes that she really went too far by wearing an outfit like that because there's nothing cute about a Playboy bunny costume. On the other hand, Medaka says that she looks cute in that outfit. However, he reminds her that she is showing too much skin for her own sake. Then he leaves the room abruptly. Mona thinks about what she just heard and notices her heart giving a stronger bang, which makes her not understand anything since for her. Medaka was never such an attractive guy, or she liked him or something like that. In her mind, she is all about making him fall in love with her to prove herself. As for Medaka, he is all shy when he remembers that he called her cute, so he crosses himself to keep his spirit clean. The next morning, Mona goes to class all confident since even Medaka recognizes that she is cute. So her mission of making him bend his knees for her has already been accomplished. She tries to talk to him, thinking that the boy will answer her with a smile on his face. But instead, he keeps staring at her with that same serious look as always. When the time comes for the festival, all the girls dress up with bunny ears but without the short clothes part. This time, they start making some cupcakes to sell in the living room until suddenly some girls go to Mona and tell her to take a break from cooking. Mona then calls Medaka to take a break with her, but the boy insists on working harder, saying that he is not tired yet. However, Mona says that he must be hungry from working so hard. Medaka then eats a piece of the rabbit cake, saying that this will be enough to keep him full during work. But upon seeing him eating the customer's orders, another classmate of their class reprimands him. As for Mona, she notices that even though he called her cute, that doesn't mean she already has him in her hands. In fact, she feels like he's rejecting her even more than before since he's even stopped looking at her. At this, Mona deduces that he's just embarrassed for calling her cute out of the blue. Suddenly, Haruno comes up to them and asks the two of them to advertise the cafe outside the room to attract more customers. When passing by a haunted house-themed event, Mona is shocked and asks them to go look for clients somewhere else. But as soon as she looks at Medaka, she notices him with a look of happiness and then asks if he would like to enter the room. Medaka says that he doesn't mind entering or not. However, Mona notices by his look that the boy does, in fact, want to enter the room. With that, Mona decides to face her fear and convinces herself that there's nothing to fear. After all, the decoration of the haunted house was dumb and made by children, which makes her feel more relieved. But as soon as she enters the room and sees the costumes and makeup of the students, Mona is scared like a child and notices that the students really managed to make the room very sinister. As for Medaka, he appreciates the entire decoration of the room and also notices the cold air that the environment has, which makes the atmosphere even more frightening. At this, Mona finds it strange that Medaka is so excited even in such an environment. As they walk, Mona ends up getting her skirt caught in a grave and asks him to give her a second until she can free herself. However, Medaka ignores her and focuses his attention only on admiring the details of the room. As soon as he sees her trapped, Medaka covers his eyes, avoiding seeing the girl's skirt lifted. As for Mona, she runs out of the room, shouting to everyone that she hates haunted houses. Meanwhile, Haruno stays in the kitchen, cheering for Mona, hoping that she is getting along with Medaka. As for the boys next door, they warn her that the dumplings are burning. Returning to Mona, she says that Haruno's plan to bring her closer to Medaka ended up being a disaster in the end. But in the midst of her lamentations, she cheers up again and decides to make their journey more exciting. In this case, she takes him to eat crepes together. While she eats, Medaka alerts her to the drops of cream that are stuck to her cheek. So Mona takes advantage of this moment to try to provoke him even more, asking the boy to clean the cream for her. In the middle of all this, a bird simply flies by them and steals her crepe. As for Medaka, he noticed that this favored him since it made her forget about her request earlier. Moving on, they decide to watch a show together. However, as Mona is not able to see the show, she asks Medaka to help her by lifting her on his shoulders. But as soon as that man turns his face, she discovers that he is not Medaka. As they move on to another event, they grab some balloons to make molds with them. However, Mona's balloon ends up bursting, while Medaka's balloon remains intact. At this, she notices that all of her plans to try to win him over are going down the drain. Then she despairs, trying to think of something else that he might like. But when she looks at the clock, she notices that the cultural festival is about to end. In this case, she only has one more hour to try to win Medaka over. As she crosses so-called the Bridge of Love, Mona remembers what Haruno had told her, that every couple who passes by holding hands is destined to be in love with each other forever. Meanwhile, one of the boys burns the bunny cake and becomes desperate to fix that mess. On the other hand, Asahi keeps a sad expression on her face and decides to return to the club because she needs to meet up with the boys she missed during the event. Looking at the other couples on the Bridge of Love, Mona is surprised to see that they are all already full of love while busy holding hands. Suddenly, a strange couple beside Medaka and Mona begins to wonder who that guy is beside Mona, but after thinking a little more, he deduces that Medaka is Mona's boyfriend because that's the only way to explain why they are on the Bridge of Love. As soon as Mona hears this, she remembers when Haruno said that she was into Medaka even though she denied it to the death. Then Mona realizes that she will end up making all the other students get the same impression. As for Medaka, he suggests that they go back to the classroom, but instead, Mona decides to advertise their cafe right there because that way they will be able to take the couples to the cafe and could also disguise themselves. As for Mona, she explains to Medaka about the operation of the Bridge of Love and then touches his hand to provoke him. At that, Medaka, without being scared, decides to go back to the room alone since there is no way he will be complying with her offer. But before he can leave the place, Mona falls to the floor on purpose and asks him to help her get up after all, that way they end up holding hands inevitably. However, Medaka gets up holding her under the arms without having to give Mona his hands and thus protecting himself from the legend of the Bridge of Love. But Mona realizes that she is heavily falling in love with Medaka no matter what. And even taking this inverted, Mona decides to run after him to take him to the bridge again. She then says that it is early for them to go back to the room, therefore she suggests that they go back to the bridge. Suddenly, two girls from their class ask the two of them to go back to the cafe. After all, the couples from the Bridge of Love are crowding up the place, which is too hard for them to handle. Thereupon, sensing that she is about to lose her chance to get back at Medaka, she tries to mislead the girls by setting up an excuse to go somewhere else, but the girls insist that they should go back. Finally, upon reaching the end of the cultural festival, Mona realizes that she ended up losing her chance to drag Medaka to the Bridge of Love, so she decides to leave it for another day and go back home. Seeing Mona with a sad look on her face, Haruno notices that she couldn't fix anything with Medaka. So Haruno decides to help her again, sending Medaka and Mona to carry the desks together on the order of the committee. While they do the job, Mona keeps her gaze on the ground as she doesn't feel like she has enough energy to continue investing in Medaka, even though Haruno gave her another chance. Seeing Medaka in complete silence, Mona starts to feel embarrassed, and then she goes back to the simple subject of asking him if he had fun during the cultural festival. While Medaka remains silent, Mona notices that she just asked a very irrelevant question as she feels that she ended up ruining any good experience he could have had at the event. After all, everything she tried to do went very wrong. When she remembers this last plan, when she tried to hold his hand, Mona gets down when she sees that not even that worked. Suddenly, she ends up bumping into a box that starts falling toward her, but Medaka manages to see the box in time and saves her. But in the process, he ends up grabbing her hand. By coincidence, they are precisely in the area of the Bridge of Love. As soon as he realizes that he has grabbed the girl's hand, Medaka gets scared. He remembers that the festival is already over, so this legend no longer counts. Even knowing that he is right, Mona blushes the same way, which makes her not understand what is going on. When Medaka starts to fix the fallen boxes, he finally answers the question she had asked him back there, saying that he had a lot of fun that day. After all, this is the first time he participated in an event like that and did most of those things. Well, the next day when going to school, Haruno sees a lot of people holding hands and notices that the love of the couples really increased after the cultural festival, which for Haruno is proof that the legend surrounding the event is real. As for Mona, she thinks the same as her friend and is surprised to discover that the Bridge of Love really works. During the conversation, Haruno asks Mona how her experience on the Bridge of Love with Medaka went. However, Mona simply changes the subject. After all, she doesn't have much to say, saying that the weather is very nice. Suddenly, upon seeing Medaka passing by them, Mona feels her heart beating too fast, and as soon as he turns to look at her, Mona automatically hides. But upon remembering all the advances she made on him the night before, Mona gathers courage and greets him. Then she goes to the classroom with him and the other friends. That's when one of the boys suggests that they go bowling together after class as a way to celebrate the end of the cultural festival that took place the day before. When Haruno sees that Mona will go with them, Haruno decides to go too. Already at the bowling alley, Mona makes a perfect strike and then looks back at Medaka, hoping that he saw her move. When she returns to her friends, she touches everyone's hand in a high-five motion as a way to celebrate the strike. But when it is her turn to touch Medaka's hand, Medaka begins to suffer with shame and remembers the moment when they shook hands. Mona also remembers and disguises it by saying that her shoelace is snapped and runs off to change her shoelaces almost instantly. After this interaction with Mona, Medaka feels that his heart starts to race. After all, he has never touched a girl's hand before since he has never been in the company of so many. In this, he begins to imagine himself touching her hand. When he realizes that he would have liked to have touched her hands, Medaka soon clears his thoughts again, saying that he enrolled in a mixed school just to train his mind to always be as pure as possible. As soon as Mona returns, she asks to sit next to him. Listening to him drinking soda, she says she is thirsty and asks to take a sip. At that, Medaka remembers that he has already touched his mouth on the bottle. Upon hearing this, Mona becomes tense but tries to control her mind, telling herself that there's nothing wrong with that. As she brings her mouth closer to the bottle, Medaka stares at her more and more tensely. Finally, Mona drinks the soda and says that they have just given an indirect kiss, wanting to provoke the boy. Having done that, she turns the bottle back to him and shows that she sees no problem. Instead, Medaka leaves with the same tough, cold, and strict poker face, saying that she will not drink the soda anymore. So he leaves and she drinks the rest by herself. The girl stays behind, all sad. With that said, he goes back to the bowling alley and is relieved to have survived all that temptation. However, when throwing the bowling ball at the pins, he misses badly due to his nervousness about the previous situation. The next day, Mona goes to class wearing the school's winter uniform, and as soon as she comes in with that look, all the students start complimenting her, saying that she looks really good in that uniform. Upon seeing that Medaka still hasn't changed out of his school's winter sweater, Mona goes to him and advises him to do so since the sweater is much more popular than the standard uniform. During their interaction, she gets all cute, hiding her hand in her pose and leaving all the boys with a premise of sweet dreams at night. While Medaka is a fool, he stands firm in the face of that temptation and says that he doesn't intend to change into the sweater since he doesn't usually feel cold in any way. Upon seeing this, Mona goes back to sitting in her seat with an angry face. Meanwhile, Medaka receives a message from Sho, who calls him so they can talk in private. As soon as Medaka meets the boy, Sho asks when he will continue to treat Mona like she is a piece of garbage. Medaka tries to explain again about the precepts of being the owner of a shrine, but before he can talk about the subject, Sho tells Medaka to shut up and says that he just has to not fall in love with Mona, and that way he will be able to stay within the norms of his religion. Besides, Sho remembers that Mona gets very depressed when Medaka treats her like trash, but still, The girl continues to talk to him as if Medaka cares about her. Therefore, Sho says that he can only be a saint for putting up with being treated like that, and she still wants to get close to Medaka. Meanwhile, Yuzuru tells Medaka that just talking to girls is not enough to make him break the precepts of his religion. Even more, Yuzuru advises Medaka to repay Mona's kindness because his religion probably tells him to be nice to other people. As soon as he leaves the boys behind, Medaka makes his way back to the room. But suddenly, he's approached by Haruno, who starts complaining to him, asking why Medaka is so rude to Mona for no reason. After all, the girl always does a lot for him. Haruno feels that he is the biggest fool for not treating Mona with the respect she deserves. While they fight, all the other classmates stand at the side watching everything and deduce that Haruno and Medaka are having a fight and breaking up. Upon seeing this, Haruno ends the discussion there and runs to the classroom. Then Medaka sees Mona helping the teacher take the papers to the teacher's room. Upon seeing this, Medaka realizes that Mona really is just a good girl. The next day, he continues with these things in his head, and upon seeing that she forgot to bring her book, he calls her to share the book with him. At that, Mona promptly starts to approach him, taking her desk with her. But upon seeing this, the idiot gets scared and moves his desk away as if he were running away from a cockroach, almost as if he was disgusted by her. At that moment, Sho and Yuzuru notice that scene from afar and start cursing him in their minds. So Medaka fixes things by sticking his desk with hers in the corner, saying that he was scared because she came so fast, and he didn't expect her to jump towards him like that. At that moment, seeing that he has sorted things out, Yuzuru, Sho, and Haruno are all relieved. As for Medaka, he keeps in mind that he will not fall in love with her, in which case he will just start being nicer to the girl. But Mona in turn gives a huge smile, which Haruno takes the opportunity to take a photo of as she is radiant. Mona wakes up on a cold rainy morning. Looking into the mirror, she is greeted by the frizz of her hair. Noticing the rain outside, she irons her hair, trying to make it less frizzy as it appears. Rainy mornings are not her favorite. This means she needs to style her hair a little longer, and on top of that, her favorite loafers just get soaked in water. However, she has no other choice. Walking in her pink umbrella, Mona feels great. Although this is not the usual reaction she gets every time it rains, this day is just different. It is as if everything works according to her satisfaction. While walking happily, she remembers Medaka's words. She says to herself, finally, Medaka succumbs unto her. It seems as if the universe is on her side as she sees a figure of a man standing at the side of a road. Like a locked target, her eyes land on Medaka, and just like that, her heart starts to feel ecstatic again. Mona greets Medaka, asking him what happened and why he does not have an umbrella in this pouring rain. Medaka, though silent, seems uncomfortable with the presence of Mona. Meanwhile, Mona recalls that whenever she greets Medaka, he always reacts in an arrogant manner, but this time he does not seem to mind, although it is quite noticeable that Medaka is bothered. Medaka tells her he finds a family of cats on the side of the road, so he gives them his umbrella. Mona, touched by this, tells him just how sweet that is, and then she invites him to share her umbrella so they can go to school together. Afraid he would complain, Mona grabs Medaka by his arm. And although Medaka is a bit annoyed, Mona insists. Medaka remembers his friend's advice to be nice to Mona, so he tries not to be rude and offers to hold the umbrella since he's taller. The two of them silently walk under the pouring rain. Mona, still in awe, cannot believe it is actually happening. A small umbrella barely covers them both, and she notices Medaka's shoulders drenched in rainwater, so she scoots closer to him. Surprisingly, she does not get any reaction from Medaka, so she assumes it is okay. She then puts her hands above Medaka's hand, which is holding the umbrella, and with this, Medaka cannot resist any longer. He tries to avoid her by creating space between them, but no matter how hard Medaka tries, Mona stubbornly follows, only getting closer to Medaka whenever he tries to get away from her. This keeps going until they are faced with a metal post. Medaka is on the verge of getting annoyed, so he tries to calm himself down while Mona tells him to get closer in order to avoid the post. Finally, they arrive at the school. Though they still get wet from the rain, they decide to go through the rear gate in order to have a little cover while going to their classroom. As they pass by the gym, a group of girls plays basketball. One girl noticeably stands out among them, Asahi. Asahi shoots the ball and a couple of girls cheer for her. Seeing this, Medaka cannot help but praise the lady. Rumors among the crowd now start to be heard. They talk about her and how good she is as a basketball player, considering that she is still a freshman. Getting distracted by the game, Mona accidentally drops her umbrella, which makes a faint sound loud enough to draw attention from the silent crowd. Due to this, even Asahi, who is currently dribbling the ball, becomes distracted. Looking at where the sound is coming from, Asahi's eyes catch Medaka. Shocked by this scene, she uncontrollably loses her balance and ends up landing on the floor face first. Meanwhile, the ball she is holding flies right in front of Mona, and as she is about to get hit, Medaka quickly takes action, placing his hand in front of Mona to save her from the ball that is about to hit her. Asahi's fall makes quite a scene, though she immediately stands up and asks for an apology from Mona. Mona, on the other hand, says she should be the one apologizing. To her surprise, Asahi actually agrees. She says that Mona should not have been a distraction and should not be watching from there. Instead, she should be up on the benches if she wants to watch. Because of her harsh words, the other girls behind her tell her to show respect to her seniors, but Asahi does not seem to care. Mona also says she is right and she attempts to leave, but before she can, Asahi grabs her by the arm, telling her she needs to ask her a question or two. Mona, though hesitant, is dragged by Asahi to the other part of the gym helplessly. As it turns out, Asahi is curious about what's up between Mona and Medaka. It seems like she is also interested in him. Mona tells her they were just classmates, but Asahi did not believe this because they came to the gym together carrying only one umbrella that they might have shared along the way. Asahi asked more questions such as if they were dating or if she liked him. Mona denies all of this, but Asahi seems to be furious. Noticing this, she was taken away by two of her teammates who told her to stop bothering Mona already. As Mona and Medaka continue to walk on the way to their class, Mona mentions the conversation with Asahi. However, Medaka did not seem to know her. Mona thought about how could he not know Asahi when Asahi knew his name. Only then did she realize that Asahi might have liked Medaka, which is why she asked her those questions. Before arriving at the class, Medaka sneezed. This may be due to his wet clothes, so he decided to change first. Because of this, Mona is left alone to think she's getting close to Medaka. Will this Asahi girl be her competition? In the classroom, a friend of Mona takes her photos. She asks her about Asahi as she tells her she is not only pretty, but also famous. As a first year, Asahi is already the star player of their basketball team and even made it to the news. A group of girls came closer when they heard Mona and her friend talking about Asahi. They joined the conversation, saying Asahi was also top of the class. Mona pretended to be amazed and praised her, but in reality she was actually threatened by how big of a competitor Asahi could be. They even compare Asahi to Mona, saying Mona is peppy while Asahi is cool, and that she does not let seniors boss her around. Her cold shoulder is also something fans look forward to. Just when Mona decides to stop thinking about her, she receives an unexpected visitor, Asahi standing in the doorway waiting for her. She came to say their conversation earlier wasn't finished yet, but she was caught off guard when she noticed that Medaka was standing right behind Mona. Her face instantly turns red and her cold and arrogant demeanor shifts into a shy and soft girl. Medaka recognized her from the basketball earlier, and because of this she was flattered and blushed even more. Her knees also became soft and she fell to the ground. Because she was wearing a short, flowy uniform skirt, her panties were visible. Mona, startled by this, could not help but shout at her. Only then did she realize her underwear was showing. Meanwhile, Medaka, together with his other guy friend, turns around in order not to see this scene. Embarrassed, she decided to run away, but before doing that, she told Mona she wouldn't lose. Did she just declare war? Mona thought to herself. The next day, rain is still pouring hard, and Mona can't stop thinking about Asahi's words. It was the first time anyone had ever declared war against her. Mona, in deep thought, noticed a girl standing at the door, Asahi. She was waiting for her once again. Asahi was staring coldly at her. When someone sneezed behind her back, it was Medaka standing behind Asahi. He told her that if she was there for someone, he could call them for her. Once again, Asahi turned red. He could not even greet a single good morning when faced with Medaka. Not letting this slip, Mona races through the door, greeting both Asahi and Medaka. Mona invites Medaka to go inside the room already since homeroom is about to start. With this, Medaka tells Asahi to head back as well. To their surprise, Asahi turns cherry red once again before walking away like a robot. Inside the classroom, Mona heard Medaka whispering about Asahi. This means she left a mark on his mind as well. She instantly became furious. Just when she was making progress, Asahi got in her way. On the other hand, Asahi is talking to her friend about how she admires Medaka. Her friend told her that if Mona does not like Medaka, then it is her chance. However, Asahi gets really nervous whenever she is around him. Suddenly, she heard a group of boys at the back hovering about a sensual photo. Her friend tells her scenes like that leave a mark on their minds. Asahi just agrees with this coldly. In gym class, Mona and her classmates are set to play basketball. This time, she plans to replace the basketball girl image of Asahi in Medaka's mind. As she put up a ponytail, everyone turned to look at her, admiring just how pretty she is in any hairstyle she pulls. The boys were the first ones to play, and Medaka was instantly hit on his first try. He was not good at basketball at all. Meanwhile, Mona, with her plan in mind, tried so hard to slay the game. She became so competitive that everyone admired her even more. In the last game for the boys, Medaka missed a free shot, so in the end they lost. Everyone in the gym heads out except for Medaka, who could not just accept his defeat. To his surprise, Mona speaks from behind. He was shocked to see her there, all beautiful and sexy. She offers to help him with the game and even volunteers to clean up for him. With this, Medaka calms himself. Clean mind, clean spirit. They start by practicing his shooting form. Mona is holding him from behind, which makes him really uncomfortable. As she continues to teach him, Asahi arrives, catching them in an awkward position. Mona explains she was just teaching him his shooting form, but Asahi proceeds to tell her that she probably likes him, looking at how clingy she is around him. Asahi then offers to coach Medaka as well. She drops on the floor and planks, saying core strength is essential for shooting. As she instructed, Medaka also planked in front of her. With his position, he could slightly see the insides of Asahi's shirt, making him red and uncomfortable. Seeing his reaction, Mona decides to also plank with them so Medaka's attention would not be drawn to Asahi alone. Mona clearly has a bigger chest than Asahi. With this, Asahi asked if Medaka dislikes smaller sizes. That was Medaka's last straw, just like a bomb waiting to explode, finally could not handle it anymore. He crawls away while shouting, leaving the two girls in shock. After that, Asahi could be seen in the stairway. Covering her red face, she contemplates what she did, realizing she may have crossed the line. While Mona ran under the pouring rain, faced with the same scenario, also regretting her actions earlier.